Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. Ladies and gents, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. This is your host, Eric, and today I'm joined by Vance Rowe. Vance, thanks for joining us on the show today, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Before we start recording, I loved what you said. I'm going to kind of ask you to repeat a version of it.
Okay.
Asking about, what you want to talk about specifically or any areas you didn't want to talk about. And you said something that I really loved, which was, things don't happen to us, but they happen for us.
Right. Absolutely. And that is it's a mindset shift, I'd say, for me. And, while you're in the thick of it, you think that all of these things are happening to you, and how on earth could all these things be going on at the same time? And then you kind of look back on it and you're like, okay, well, I was supposed to learn this lesson and I was supposed to learn this lesson. So look, I spent 25 years in and around law enforcement, and I certainly want to help others that come behind me. So if I can be of any assistance to them while they're still on the job, even after they retire, that's what I'm going to do. We're all brothers and sisters, and, we're trained that well before the academy, but certainly during the academy.
Can you walk us through and talk about how you started in the first responder world, how you started police work?
I actually was going to college outside of Philadelphia, and it's a place called Westchester University. Criminal justice major. I bet that was, that's a big surprise for everybody. And I had just finished my first year. And I was 19 years old. My mom found a newspaper article that I could go work for the Ocean City, Maryland Police Department in the summertime and be a PSA. Now, you're probably like, oh, well, what is a PSA? Well, essentially, I wrote meter tickets and parking tickets, and I did a lot of traffic direction. So I did that when I was 19. I did it when I was 20. I wore a hat that said meter enforcement. I have come to grips with my past. So at 21 years old, I became a seasonal police officer, which is still a process that we do here today, that we actually still have seasonal police officers that come down, work for the summer, get experience, and then they end up getting jobs somewhere else. And then I actually did my college internship in Ocean City. Once I got done with college, I honestly made my life down at the beach. And I have been here. I was in the police department for 22 years, and I still work in public safety. I am currently a police and fire dispatcher, and I didn't necessarily leave law enforcement on my terms. And I only say that because it was an injury that ended up ending my law enforcement career, but still certainly attached to public safety.
I say humble beginnings, and I love it because I know people that start in parking, or they start in, quote unquote, the non-glorious jobs. But man, if you can learn humility and get your foot in the door, what a fantastic way to start.
Oh yeah,
you got
for sure.
A fantastic young cop who started in parking, got a fantastic young cop who started in dispatch, call receiving, right? And so These are very ancillary jobs that blend really well into skill sets. So just a quick shout out for that.
And I'll tell you what, and you just made me think of something else. And a lot of my life lessons I got from playing football. And I played football all through high school, all through college, and I was an offensive lineman. And you want to talk about like the humble beginnings. We're the big fat guys that are, right on the offensive line, and we're pushing people out of the way so that the guy that carries the ball or can catch the ball can go dance in the end zone. But no cheering, no rah-rah, just I'm going to get down and dirty. I'm going to do my job. And that's, I don't know, I kind of gone on into other parts of my life, I guess.
I love that. For those that know me well, sports ball team. I'm not a big sports person. I wasn't raised on it. So your description of the O-line was very helpful for me. And I love it. I love it. You're like, I get in the way and I block so that these people can run with that thing.
Right.
It's kind of oblong.
Exactly right.
It's called a ball. It doesn't look like a ball.
When we would go to So this was in college. We would travel in 2 charter buses. The buses were named, and the first bus was called Skills, and Skills meant anybody that touches the ball, like quarterbacks,
I
wide
love where this is
receivers,
going.
running
Yeah.
backs, like the pretty boys. And then there was the stud bus, and those are the people like me, the big fellas that take up probably 2 seats and are never going to touch the ball or should never touch the ball.
Sweet. So you got into public safety, you got into law enforcement. Tell me a little bit about your career.
I actually started my career in the city of Salisbury, which is about 30 miles outside of Ocean City. And Salisbury City is more of a metropolitan police department. I got a lot of experience in a very short amount of time. So after completing my 6-month academy, I worked there for a little over a year. But my goal had always been to go back to Ocean City. So I come back to Ocean City on a full-time basis in the summer of 2002. I started right away, just making a lot of arrests, making a name for myself. Very early on in my career, I get picked by a lieutenant to start working in our training division. So what you'll see is I actually end up spending probably half of my career in an admin role. So that was the start of it. So that's the fall of 2005. My lieutenant at the time, his name's Greg Guyton. He was like, "Hey, do you want to work in the training and recruiting division?" And I really liked him or respected him. And I said, "Sure. Yeah, let's do that." And then I had to like stop and pause and be like, "What is that job? What is it you want me to do?" And it became recruiting, going to college classrooms, talking about and trying to get people to come down and test. It was running our testing weekends. It was doing backgrounds. It was training these kids to be police officers every summer. So I did that for a number of years. And then later on in my career, which was a very easy transition for me, was we didn't have a polygraph program. So I became our first one with all the background information that I already knew how to do and stuff like that. It was kind of easy to get into that. And I did that for the last 9 years of my career. That it was me and one other guy, and then maybe a second guy we added on. But yeah, I got a lot of experience in a lot of different things that are not necessarily just patrol cop. Now, I do want to explain for people that are not familiar with Ocean City. So a lot of people right now, just in law enforcement, they're short of cops, and it means that they're having to work extra shifts or they're having to work like extra hours. Mm-hmm. And we have a very unique environment in the fact that we're a beach town that from like May till through October, we are incredibly busy. But then in the off season, when it gets super cold out, nobody's going to the beach. So we work a lot in that 5-month time period. So working 5 and 6 days a week is not odd. And it just gets old. And I can remember in the beginning, so no matter what I was doing in the winter, every summer I'd always go back to patrol. So no matter how busy I had been over the fall, the spring, I'd always go back and I'd work patrol in the summertime. And in the beginning was great because I was like, oh my God, I'm going to make all this money and then we're going to be able to do whatever we want. And I got to tell you, like a couple years in, you're just like, there's got to be something more. It just sucks. All you do is you go to work, you work 12 hours, you come home, you do some laundry, you pass out, you go back to work, and living on 7-Eleven hot dogs and energy drinks till that's
an O-line diet.
You can't take the fat kid out of me. So
I would never dare.
So yeah, that certainly is something that, it still affects some of the cops that work for us, that, that there's a long period of time that they're working, and then everybody hits it at different times though. I want to say it's somewhere between like the 4 and 8 year mark. And I remember when I was in the police academy, them telling us, listen, look around, because in 10 years, half of you won't be doing this. Mm-hmm. And I was like, why wouldn't they? I mean, you gotta love this job. But I think it just wears on you in all different aspects. I actually met a guy yesterday who was a waiter at a restaurant. My wife and I went out to lunch, and he had been a police officer for 7 years. And then he was just like, it's not for me anymore. I just can't do it. And I didn't have a lot of quit in me. So even when times got tough, I wasn't like, I got to get out of here. I did have a moment towards the end of my career that I actually told my wife that I don't think I want to be a police officer anymore. But, all along up till that point, I've always loved the job. it more became the ancillary things around me and problems that I had with people around me, and a lot of people that I'd work for. That's where I started to have problems. It was personality things, and people with personal problems and stuff like that. It just got hard.
Yeah, it can
People
also
that
be a
just didn't
struggle.
have the same. Yeah, right. They just didn't have the same maybe work ethic and like value driven the way that I am. So yeah, that would just cause some problems at times.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to tell you. So I want to talk about a little bit like what really affected me and what really kind of got me into a place that wasn't great. Just because
Please.
I want people to recognize that we're not superheroes and we are human beings that are seeing and dealing with things that are just awful. And maybe that's not daily, but it's at least weekly. And that stuff stays with you. So at the time, like I said before, I was working an awful lot, and I was working about 50, 60-hour weeks for 9 months a year. And it was just wearing on me. I wasn't able to do things that were outside of law enforcement because all I wanted to do when I was off was sleep.
You're burned out.
Yeah. And I wasn't working out. I wasn't, doing anything fun. Anyway, so in my job at that point, I was doing a lot of polygraphs, and, everybody always tells stories, and they're like, everybody has a story about going to some guy that was a real like jerk to them about doing a polygraph. And that wasn't me. But what I want to share with you is there's some pretty awful things that people have done to other people. Or the one that I didn't really realize when I got into it was a lot of people that are getting into the law enforcement region were victims of crime at some point in their life, and some pretty awful things. And that stuff started to affect me. It's like I was taking it on, and I didn't have a way to get rid of it. Add into that I just had a really, really bad relationship with my immediate supervisor. And we just didn't click. We didn't gel. We never did. And it just was a really long time coming. At the time I was drinking an awful lot, which, look, when I was in college, it's one thing. It's parties, it's socialization and stuff like that. You get into law enforcement, it's the same thing. But I can't tell you at what point that I actually started to recognize that was a problem. But what I can tell you is as my mental health started to deteriorate and the booze really went kind of haywire and I was really spiraling, and we'll talk about that more in a second. There comes to be this point in 2016 that I actually go to my wife and I'm like, I can't fathom doing this for 9 more years, which is what I had at that point. I had 9 years till I could get my 25 years in my pension. I just couldn't work all those hours and not do anything fun. And I'm just like, this is not for me anymore. She said, okay, all right, you can't just quit tonight. All right, I recognize that. So, we had made a plan that I would maybe leave the next summer or before the next summer. And I just never got there. So at the very end of 2016, working a special event, I fell off my bicycle and I ruptured my patella tendon in my left knee.
Ooh.
And what that ended up doing, that injury is what ended my police career. And here's why. So they fixed my knee. There was a lot of rehab. There was a lot of sitting around doing nothing, watching TV, of course. But I have nerve damage as a result of it. And they don't know what caused it. And they've tried all kinds of different things to get rid of it. But what it does is it makes my left foot burn all the time. So like to the point, I mean, how silly is this? Like I haven't worn socks in like 7 years, and like I don't wear shoes. I just walk around barefoot or I wear flip flops all the time.
That is what beach cops have to wear, right? Flip flops,
right? That's standard issue. As long as they're black, they're tactical flip flops. Then we're good.
Black, yeah.
I am trying to work through my injury. they tell me that it might take up to 2 years for the nerve to regenerate and for me to, uh, be a whole man again, I suppose. And it just never came back. And I assumed that when we'd get to that 2 year mark, that my police agency would just be like, okay, well, now we're going to move you into this position and we're going to do something else with you. And I actually offered at that point, I'm like, just make me a civilian. I'm taking up a supervisor role. So I'd love if you'd promote somebody, you could hire another cop, just help me out. And nobody was interested, unfortunately. And we didn't have a disability retirement at that moment. So what ends up happening is that there's this point where there's just no decision. And I'm just spiraling at this point because I've lost everything I've been for the last 20 years. And I'm drinking to the point of blacking out like 3 to 4 days a week. It finally comes to be that my wife says something to me, and she takes videos of me and what I look like and how I'm acting. And the next day she's like, we got to talk. And listen, I was hungover as hell. I was even more embarrassed. And, the person that I probably love and respect the most in this world is certainly disappointed in me.
Mm-hmm.
There was the moment right there. And it was like, we got to get this under control. And she wasn't giving me ultimatums. She wasn't telling me, hey, you got to quit, dude. She was saying, I'm worried about you. And at that moment, I'm like, all right, well, I'm just not going to drink today. And then I think I'm just a competitive person. And I started kind of like, I'm not going to drink this week. And then I'm not going to drink this month. And so at this point, that day that she confronted me was 4 years and a couple months ago. And I haven't had a drink since. And, everybody has had different journeys in their sobriety career. For me, it was leaning on people that I trust. It was doing my own research. It was, I did not go the AA route, but I certainly know people that have, and I can certainly give different pieces of advice as far as how to get sober. But I do want to tell you that the other part of this was prior to that. This is in the point where like my police career was ending. I'd gone through the workers' comp hearing and drinking an awful lot. And I started to have those thoughts of killing myself. And like, wouldn't it be easier if I was just gone and just no more pain? And I actually came up with a plan, knew how I was going to do it. And I knew how dangerous that was at that moment because of, I had been a CIT instructor, and I had actually been a CIT role player. And I'm like, it's the first 2 questions you ask people. Like, are you thinking about killing yourself? Okay, you are. Do you have a plan? And when they say yes, you're like, okay, they're serious. Well, shit, here's where I am. And that's a bad place to be. So I don't tell my wife in the beginning. I don't tell her for a while. I don't finally tell her until it is thoughts that are constant, that they just won't go away. And I'm like, I got to tell you something. And so as soon as I tell her, we start talking to my family doctor. We start working on different things. Now, the one thing I was still doing at the point was drinking, which, I mean, that's not great. And I had been on an antidepressant, and again, not wonderful things to be doing, but again, you have to go through sometimes these trials and tribulations to become a different or higher version of yourself.
Absolutely.
So within a couple of days, within a couple of days of stopping drinking, I actually go to a yoga class for the first time, and I can't tell you why that was. That it was that day that I was like, it's time. I'm going to go. And I had never gone to a yoga studio before, and I had never gone because I don't look like the Instagram models that everybody sees. All I'm saying is when I walk into a yoga studio, I stand out. I am not small. So
hold on, you're saying hot dogs and energy drinks don't build a typical, stereotypical yoga physique?
Doesn't get you all long and lean. Right. So I go for the first time, and I have this amazing experience over the first couple of times that I go to a yoga class. And I tell my wife, I'm like, you know what? this is really helping me. I'm going to teach this to people like me. I'm going to teach this to cops and firefighters and military folks, people that think and act like me, because they need it. They may not understand they need it. And they're not necessarily going to go to a yoga studio like I did. So I can go to them on their terms.
Yeah.
So I kind of made that decision very early on. I found I went to a yoga teacher training not that long after that, and kind of been teaching ever since. And, my whole goal in this is I want to put a significant dent into first responder suicide. We have this real problem that these folks who have been superheroes, these folks that have been the fixers and the problem solvers, they have these thoughts that just kind of go through their mind that just won't go away, and they don't know what to do with it. And they think, all right, if I go to my sergeant or if I go to my lieutenant and be like, something's not right, somebody's going to take their gun and badge away from them. And that's, I mean, most people would say that's the worst thing to ever happen to them. Why is it we can't come up with some way to meet that with like some kindness and compassion and be like, oh, listen, let's get you all the help you need. As soon as you're right, we put you right back on the job. And I couldn't fathom telling anybody at my workplace when I was going through what I was going through. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, I was telling my wife about it. My family doctor was involved. My therapist was involved, but that's what got me straight. It wasn't people at my workplace. I love that we now have peer support people. I have certainly taken quite a shine to that. And the reason why is, look, I've been there. And I'm doing a disservice to the people that come behind me if I don't share. If I share and I'm honest and I'm like, listen, I was not in the right headspace. So I'm going to try to help somebody else as best I can. The whole thing I want to do now is, I want to teach yoga classes. I love to do them live. I've started doing them on YouTube, and however I can deliver them at this point,
Yeah, man, you took us through a crash course of, the ups and downs. And I just want to take a moment to say a couple things. And one is that, thank you for sharing, and thank you for your courage in staying with us, right? We know this is a heavy job. We know that mental health issues and suicide are very prevalent in first responder work and in military work and experience and culture. And so this is a very necessary endeavor. It's a very necessary topic to continue to talk about. And kudos to your wife, and, you talk about her being your partner, your best friend, and for her to have that real talk where a lot of times you hear about these types of confrontations where there's never a good time. But even how you explained it, and it wasn't to say like, hey, I have all the solutions or ultimatums or things, but just to level with you. And you remember being hungover, and of course that would be a bad time, but there's no good time. And so,
right.
And maybe that was the best time because it appears like it worked, right? And so
it did. And do you know that it's not for it's 2 years after the fact, and I'm actually doing a podcast, and it's a lot more about stopping to use alcohol and folks that are trying to get into recovery. And the person actually says to me, "Hey, she really took a risk that day," and I had never thought of it. I had never thought about the fact that I could have just like flown off the handle and been so overly defensive and been like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any problem. I don't know. There has been a level of trust and openness between the two of us since the time we started dating. And whenever she says something and she kind of has that, hey, I'm worried. There's something up, or we got to talk about this. I'm just going to listen. And yeah. I'm probably going to do most of what she says.
That's great.
Sometimes I don't do it all, but
yeah. No one needs to be perfect.
Right.
No one should be. But no, I mean that says a lot for your relationship, and I think a lot of people might be plug and playing their own situations or hardships with their spouse or people that they know, and maybe expecting that defensiveness, right? Maybe expecting that emotional response that denial. And so we've seen it play out those ways where we've heard about it. So it's very fortunate that you were in a place to receive it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, and like I said, it came from this really, really embarrassed place of, I don't ever want to be back at this place again. How do I make this not happen?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it started, honestly. And then kind of as I evolve in this sobriety, it starts getting easier. It starts actually to gain strength. I have met other people. And so I have a network of people that if I ever was struggling, I could certainly reach out to. And what we've done locally, a guy who is one of our firefighters, who is also a mental health therapist, started a first responder recovery group, and we meet twice a month. And it's just it gave us community again. We actually had a meeting Wednesday night, and it comes up almost every time. And I just want to share this for anybody that currently is like, do I have a problem? When I was really going through it, and when I was really in that dark place, I always felt like I was by myself. No matter if I had people around me, I always felt very alone. It's not a great place to be. But what's amazing is when you go to these groups, I start to hear the same people saying the same things that I don't tell other people, things that are just in my head. And
it's
I'm
like they're in your head,
like,
right?
Right.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
But it's immediate community, and you feel this trust, and you can open up. And that's where a lot of the healing happens, is being able to let that stuff out, and just being able to talk honestly, openly about what you're struggling with. Because listen, as a police officer, you're supposed to look perfect every day, and not only look perfect, act perfect, do it exactly right every single time. Hey, man, that's a lot of pressure. And you're talking about for 25 years. That's an awful lot. So I just think we do ourselves a disservice as law enforcement agencies if we're not giving people outlets for mindfulness, for stress relief. Certainly, look, I'm all about yoga, but that's not completely what it's about, because that just became my thing.
Yeah.
Everybody should have a thing.
Yeah. I love that.
Everybody should be into something else that ain't the job.
Yeah. 100%, man. And I just want to, kind of connect that to the earlier point where you were taking on all this angst and all this trauma, right? It's secondary trauma. You're literally, not with the intention of like a therapist or peer support role, but people are revealing a lot of these really significant things in their lives, right? In a polygraph. And so you do see that manifest a lot of times where, from my experience in the hiring unit, the investigator needs to know these things, because if they ask you about if you ever, perpetrated these kinds of things, you can kind of have a read sometimes, because there's a really emotional response because they were victims, right? A lot of times,
that's true.
First responders, those that served, were victims. They want to do something about it, which is so amazing that they're paying that forward and to combat that. But to see that in you and to reflect on that and have nowhere to metabolize that, right? And that's kind of what I was making a note between that and your toxic boss, your toxic work environment at the time. And I think everyone, if they're honest with themselves, can remember a time where maybe it wasn't a direct boss, but maybe it was a couple steps up, or a peer, right? Where you're like, man, as soon as I was in the vicinity, I just want to be anywhere else, right? You feel so, It feels so catabolic. It feels so damaging. And to have that every day, that's a huge impact to your mental health, to your well-being.
Agree. Yeah. I said it earlier on, I take a lot of what a lot of my life lessons came off the football field. And, the one thing that I was always trained to do is, I played offense for a good long part of my career, and 11 people have to work together. And that's how you win, is those 11 people have to work together. And I thought when I got into law enforcement, that's the way that they thought too. Because when I went to the police academy, and they're like, leave no one behind, and back the blue and thin blue line, and everybody talks about that. And then I experience it, and it's different. I have worked with some phenomenal people, like better cops than I'll ever be. But then I've also worked with some people that I just can't understand why on earth they ever got into law enforcement in the first place, because
Yep.
all they're ever trying to do is tear down other people. And that stuff really pisses me off.
Yeah, I feel
Because
you.
I thought we're supposed to be all on the same team. And
Yeah.
maybe that's my own like naivete, but
No, it's whether it's idealism or extreme positivity or unrealistic, whatever you want to call it, it's necessary. Like we need to strive for that. There's enough people that are about it, and I venture to guess that anyone listening to my podcast or continuing to listen to this episode is about it, right? And so
right.
that's why we're having the conversations. But yeah, I love that. I I'm no stranger to that. Yeah, there's definitely people where that I've been able to brush shoulders with that are better cops than I'll ever hope to be. Um, my thing is just trying to do what I can do best, and this conversation is a part of that. And it's talking about wellness, it's talking about uncomfortable things that are going to help build our culture in the direction it needs to go. And so that's why I really appreciate you coming on and having all these discussions, and it goes in different angles. But another thing I kind of want to rewind back to that I think it's really impressive, and I'm also kind of curious if you've given it a lot of thought, but you were able to flip, your addiction, your drinking into a competitive thing the other way, right? You're able to like challenge yourself. And so it's almost too simple. But it
Right.
also, you talked about how it built momentum for yourself, because not only were you doing it longer, but you were meeting more people and finding more resources to stay successful. It's such a paradigm shift, right? When we think about how ingrained someone is in a bad habit, right? There's a lot of momentum there, but just a simple switch of, hey, I'm going to challenge myself, and I'm competitive, and I'm stubborn, so I'm going to let this be a weapon against that, right? Like I'm going to use this to weaponize against alcoholism or heavy drinking. Have you thought much about how you're able to do that, or what might help people get there for whatever their thing is, whether it's drinking or whether it's overwork or avoidance of certain things that they need to focus on to improve their lives?
Yeah. I got to tell you, the biggest thing for me is I didn't do it by myself. I certainly had people that I was leaning on, my wife being one of them, and then some very close friends that had stopped drinking at different points in their career, and stuff that I knew about that I would be like, "Can we talk? I need to run something past you." And um, I mean, and listen, there are facilities that are first responder only that folks can go to. And depending on where you are in the nation, there is something, maybe closer by to you than me, but I have a place that's 2 hours away from me. Should it have gotten to that point? I mean, it was a consideration at a point like, do I need to go away for a little while? I have to tell you that I isolated away from not completely, but I wasn't going to social things for a good couple months. I mean, borderline a year, where people were drinking because I couldn't. And that was protecting my own mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I am fine now. Like, I don't care anymore. Everybody else can drink. My wife can have a glass of wine or two at dinner. God bless her, because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to drink 2 drinks. I just don't. So I just can't drink any. I've already had I've had my lifetime fill at 46. So I'm all done.
Yeah.
But the way she sees it, and the way I kind of frame it now is, look, I will drive anybody around. You drink whatever you want. The only thing that I have now, and it's just kind of like a deal I have with her, is if we've been somewhere for like 2 hours and people are starting to get like rowdy, I have to leave. I can't.
Yeah.
That's one thing I can't watch, and just because it causes too many uncomfortable things for me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's just maybe in time that goes away, but that just hasn't gone away yet. But I just want people to understand that none of this, none of this recovery stuff, none of this mental health stuff, none of this is like fix yourself. It's all finding people that you trust,
Mm-hmm.
and finding people that you can have offline conversations with and be like, what did you do? How did it help you? Can you point me in the right direction? So when I was still in my police agency, they would not let me be a part of the peer support team. And that actually really made me mad. Just with the experience that I have, I may not be able to fix you, but I can get you in the right place, or I can get you pointed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's the point of peer support. It's like, it should be more, my head chaplain of my department and region calls it like a psychological Band-Aid, right? We're not trying to fix it. We're not therapists. We're not MHPs. It's just trying to steer someone the right way and just give them some instant minor relief, right? A minor release per se.
Yeah, I agree. And so what ended up happening with me is what ends my police career is that injury. And in 2022, we actually got a new city manager, and I had actually written a letter to the city, and I proposed that I'd buy out my last 3 years and I would just leave. And so he was like, come down to my office. We're going to talk. So we have this conversation. He knows I'm displeased with where I am and what I'm doing. So he offers me a different position. He goes, would you go be a police and fire dispatcher? And I mean, that had never been a thought of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, sure. Whatever my stage in life is, I'll put my whole heart in it. I'll do it as best I can. And here we are. I've been doing it for about 1.5 years. And I can retire now in a little over a year if I want, or I can stay and do drop and stay an extra 3 years again, if I want. If I was still in the police department, that absolutely not. I was going to leave right at 25 and not look back. But again, things happen for you. So maybe I had to go through those stages of my life and those storms in order for a different, clearer path to present itself. And maybe this is my bigger purpose, is to teach others about mindfulness, to teach others about yoga, and show other people, look, this is where I was and this is where I am. Recovery is absolutely possible.
Yeah. I love that, man. I think there is something to that. I personally do believe a lot of that things happen for a reason. And regardless of people's beliefs and faith or purpose, I think everyone that is prudently minded will recognize that in hardship is the best opportunity to build resilience, and that growth happens in uncomfortable places, in terrible trenches, right? And so to see that in you is very inspiring for everyone. And I love that you've made it part of your personal mission and purpose to share that, not just the story, but the lessons.
Yeah. And I got to so funny, I got to go back to football one more time. When it would be, 2 minutes to go and you're down by 4, you need to score a touchdown. And so you're up against this like adversity. And so you're with these 11 guys and you're all like, all right, come on, we're going to put your hands in here. We're going to win this game. And you just know it's going to happen. I don't know how, but we just know, because the 11 of us believe in one another and we know we're going to do it. So I always think it's adversity is a funny thing in the fact that it reveals true character, because everything's easy on clear sunny days.
Sure.
Everybody can be happy then. But what happens to you when you are faced with a shitty situation? What do you do with it? So that's just, that kind of like my point there. There's one other thing that I do want to share. And it's just an organization that I've become kind of a part of in the last year that I think is an incredible organization, and it's an incredible resource for anybody that needs it. And it's called Copline. And it is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365 days a year crisis hotline for police officers and retired police officers, where any time of day, any day of the year, they can call a Copline number and they're going to talk to a retired police officer. They are not going to talk to somebody that doesn't get it. They are going to talk to somebody that has at least 10 years of police experience under their belt. And in many cases, they have 20 to 30. And it's people that are going to understand exactly what it's like to be in law enforcement. And this is really a way that us as listeners can give back to our brothers and sisters in blue, because, we've all been through different situations, and then they can just vent this stuff out. And a lot of times we can offer some suggestions. We have a vetted list of therapists that are culturally competent, and we can, based on their geographic location, we can get them maybe 3 or 4 options as far as therapy, if they're agreeable to it. Some people are just adamantly opposed. Hey, I'm not going to therapy, but what if it helps? It certainly was one of those things that helped me. So I share, I certainly share my own story with people when it's appropriate to just say, hey, look, this is what I did. And, it's almost an instant connection when you're talking to somebody and that they went through the same thing that you went through. So it's just a fantastic resource. And whether you had a bad day or you had a fight with your spouse, or you had it out with your boss, any of those things, or maybe you got in trouble. Maybe you got locked up for DUI. It happens. I mean, it's not great, but where are you going to go? It's not like you're going to call up your chief of police and be like, listen, I got some shit to say. It just isn't. So you got to be able to take that and put it somewhere. So
you got to make your notifications up the chain, but then you need to unpack that, right? You got to talk through the stress of that, and you need a safe space to do that. So, I love that you plug that.
And what happens is, look, if a cop gets in trouble, so whether that's a criminal thing, whether it's an admin thing, they get suspended. And what happens to them? They take everything away from you and send you home. So they've taken everything that is important to you, and then they send you away. And I would hope somebody is checking on them, but that's dangerous. To just let that person be kind of with their own thoughts. So this certainly gives people the option that they can call and talk through some things. And that's sometimes all people need. They just need to get it out, and then they're maybe seeing it a little bit differently. But yeah, when we're left alone with our own thoughts, that can be just a tough place to be.
Yeah, no, I love that you plugged that and talked about that. What are some things that you think, you talked about yoga being your thing, and then just trying to help everyone realize that they need a thing. What do you think are some things that people can think about if they're recognizing, man, I'm working a lot and it just feels like I got so much going on with work and home, and when do I have the time for like one more thing?
Right. And it's interesting because when you start to focus a little bit of time on yourself, you're actually going to feel like you have more hours in the day. And I know that doesn't sound exactly right. And I can say that that's just a feeling, but so for so long, a lot of us as first responders have put everybody else ahead of ourselves, that no matter what it is, we will literally do anything to help someone else, but wouldn't help our own selves. And what I'm asking for you to do is to put yourself first, because you can't help somebody else if you got nothing left to give. So if you can carve out a little bit of time, and look, I teach and I go to like hour-long yoga classes. You don't need that. You can do 15 minutes. You can do 30 minutes. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you want to get into, the martial arts. Maybe you want to get into cycling, working, lifting weights or CrossFit. Listen, the other one that I do that you'd probably be like, what is, I like to paddleboard. Again, and I happen to live at the beach. So, surfing and boogie boarding, those are big things down here, but that's just not, I did boogie boarding as a kid, but I just haven't done it recently. Try different stuff. So we're all proud people. We as police officers, we don't want to suck at anything. And if you try something for the first time, listen, you're going to suck at it. Don't be afraid to go try something and suck, because you're going to get better. So that's, that's really my advice to everybody is to go find their thing, and their thing is not their job, and it can't be, because it'll never love you back.
That's such a healthy thing, is find something you're bad at. And that's where I love things like
I love that you talked about yoga, and I've dabbled. And when I say dabble, means I've looked at videos and I've tried to do things, and my wife made fun of me for my form, and I'm like, this is really hard, and I can't even. It's really hard, and I'm not even doing it the right way. But maybe that means I should dabble some more, right?
Right.
But whatever physical endeavor builds itself into getting harder, right? Like there's progressions in yoga, there's progressions in weight training, there's progressions in endurance training. Like that there's something you can do longer or heavier or more nuanced, and so we should always have this kind of student hat we put on. And for a lot of us, when we're facing burnout in the job, it's because we're pretty good at the job. We've been doing the job, right? So find something where you're a novice again. Yeah, it was really uncomfortable being a terrible new baby cop, but man, how good did it feel when you weren't a total newbie, when you actually were putting some things together and getting a confession and going to where the suspect was anticipated to go because you've seen this kind of thing before, and you're just putting it all together. So nice reminder just to build that into your wellness practice, just to be bad at something and to be uncomfortable, because that's where you're going to grow.
Yep. Every time. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're just not going to go anywhere. You're just going to spin your wheels. So yeah, I like that one, that, just don't be afraid to suck at something.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Vance. I loved having you on the show. Certainly huge reminders that you're never alone. Anyone listening to this, or, maybe you're in a fine space right now, but maybe this voice and Vance's voice will ring out to you, a year down the line or a couple years down the line, you're facing a hard time. Hopefully you remember, hey, you're never alone. There's always someone thinking what you're thinking or who has been where you are. So whether it's Copline or, in my region, there's Code Ford Northwest. And I know there's a bunch of different agencies, and Copline's really easy to remember and look up too. So just realize that, hey, maybe, inpatient treatment sounds really terrifying. Well, it doesn't have to be that, right? No, it's a resource. There's regional resources. There's other realms and different facets and different options. So try to just focus on the little things and just stay with us, right? And
little things become big things. It's like the law of inertia. You just got to get it going. If you get it going, it starts to snowball.
Yeah.
So you just got to take that one little step and just be like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to do something better, and I'm going to do something just for me. And then maybe the next day you're like, all right, I did 15 minutes. I'm going to do 20, or I'm going to take a walk around my block, or I'm not going to drink a 12 pack. I'm only going to drink like 2 beers, something, something that's a little bit better. And if I can in any way help, I certainly will. And I don't know if you can put if I give you my contact info, if you can post
why don't you share how people can get a hold of you, and then it'll also be in the show notes.
Okay, so easiest way to get a hold of me, and I'm going to give you 2 ways. One is by email, and that is yogarescueinfo@gmail.com. yogarescueinfo@gmail.com, and I'll give my cell number, which is 410-726-2469. 410-726-2469. And Eric, I'll send that stuff to you too.
Perfect.
As far as posting it in the notes. But yeah, send me an email, text me, call me. I don't care. I will get back to you if I can't answer you immediately. But yeah, if I can be a resource to you, I will be.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Vance. Appreciate you, man.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.